Have you ever sat in a house filled with memories, only to feel like a stranger in it? The air in my living room that afternoon was still warm from the fire I had lit that morning, but inside me, a chill had settled, the kind that comes not from weather, but from realizing your family might be plotting against you. I was sitting in the exact chair where my husband Henry had once proposed we knock down the wall and open up the kitchen. Now, that same open space echoed with the clink of a coffee cup, the measured footsteps of my daughter-in-law, and the sound of something I never expected: betrayal dressed as kindness. Her name was Claire, and 2 years ago, she married my only son, Daniel. Back then, she had seemed like a breath of fresh air, soft-spoken, always helpful, calling me Mom with a kind of practiced affection. But that affection had changed, subtle at first, a withheld smile, a glance exchanged with Daniel when I offered advice. And lately, an unmistakable chill in her voice when she spoke to me, like I was an obstacle she was waiting to remove. I hadn't wanted to believe it, not even when they moved into my home last fall after Daniel lost his job and Claire insisted their condo was too small for their future family. Henry and I had built this house with our bare hands, brick by brick, dream by dream. It was never supposed to be a lifeboat for a marriage built on convenience and entitlement. Claire sat across from me now at the kitchen island, her fingers tapping against a manila folder. She was smiling, but not with warmth. Her smile was sharp, like the edge of a paper cut you don't notice until it bleeds. We were thinking, she began, that since you're not really using the upstairs anymore, and the house is in your name, it might make sense to begin transferring ownership, just to simplify things. For estate purposes, of course. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, trying to see the girl who had once brought me fresh tulips on Mother's Day. But that girl was gone. In her place was someone wearing the mask of a daughter-in-law, sitting in my kitchen, suggesting I hand over the deed to my home. Daniel stood by the window, silent, eyes downcast. I spoke softly, as if speaking louder might shatter something fragile. This house is not just property, Claire. It's the only thing your father-in-law left behind. Claire tilted her head with mock sympathy. Of course, Mom. And that's why we want to make sure it stays in the family. The family. She said it like I wasn't part of it. My heart ached, not from fear of losing the house, but from the realization that my son was letting someone else treat me like a relic, like furniture that came with the home but could be quietly replaced. She pushed the folder toward me. Just take a look, she said lightly. We had a lawyer friend draft a simple transfer document. It's all very standard. Daniel can walk you through it. But Daniel didn't move. His silence was louder than Claire's voice. I looked at the folder but didn't touch it. I'll review it, I said finally. But not today. Claire's smile flickered. Of course, no rush. Just, sooner would be better. We want to apply for a renovation loan, and ownership documents would really help. So there it was, a renovation loan, on a house I still owned, with walls I had painted, floors Henry had laid, memories I had buried in the very soil beneath the garden. They left soon after. Claire kissed me on the cheek, cold lips, colder intent, and Daniel mumbled something about calling me later. I sat there alone for a long time after they left. Then I stood, walked to the study, and locked the door behind me. They thought they could corner me like a lonely widow with too many photo albums and not enough fight. But what Claire didn't know, what Daniel had never even asked about, was what Henry and I had done 5 years before he passed. We had quietly transferred ownership of the house into an irrevocable trust, not for tax reasons, but because Henry had seen what money can do to people, especially family. We had agreed this house would never be leverage in someone else's plan. And now Claire was trying to take it, not just the structure, but the legacy, the sweat, the story. So I did what I always do when the world tries to bend me. I went to the closet, took out Henry's old ledger, and began my own plan. Not a confrontation, not a fight, a lesson. Because if Claire wanted to play games with deeds and lawyers, she was about to learn what it means to face a woman who had nothing left to lose, except the truth. And the truth was, I was never the one who needed saving. It started with small things you might not notice unless you were watching closely. Claire began rearranging furniture when I wasn't home. She had the guest bathroom repainted without asking, using a color that clashed with everything else in the house. She stopped calling me Mom and started saying things like, Susan prefers it this way, as if my presence was the exception in my own home. And Daniel, my son, my baby, just stood back and let it all happen. He didn't protest. He didn't question her. He didn't even notice the way my world was being dismantled, piece by piece. But I noticed, and I wrote it all down. Henry used to say, if they think you're fragile, don't correct them, just sharpen your edge in silence. So I did. I called Marilyn, my old friend and the estate attorney who helped Henry and me set up the irrevocable trust. She was retired now, but her memory was sharper than any blade. Do you still have a copy of the trust documents? I asked. She chuckled. Of course I do. You know I never throw anything out. Why? Are you finally going to tell Daniel? Not yet, I said quietly. First, I need them to walk into their own mistake. She paused. What's going on, Susan? They're circling, I replied. And they think I'm weak. Marilyn let out a breath. I'll send the documents. And Susan, don't let them take what you built. I won't, I whispered. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed: the trust documents, a digital copy of the deed, and the amendment Henry and I had both signed years ago that froze any transfer of the house without both of our original signatures. His death had sealed the contract. The house wasn't legally mine anymore. It belonged to the trust, and no matter what Claire thought, I couldn't give it away even if I wanted to. But that didn't stop her from trying. She left pamphlets for kitchen renovations on the counter. One had a sticky note on it that said, for resale value. She began inviting her friends over for wine nights in my living room, laughing like she owned the walls around her. And Daniel, dear God, Daniel. One night, I found him in the garage going through Henry's old tool chest, the one I had left untouched for years, just looking for the wrench set. He mumbled. He didn't ask, didn't notice. The picture of Henry on the wall right above it didn't seem to care. Something in me broke that night, so I made the next move. I left an open folder on my writing desk. Inside it, a single-page property summary I had typed up myself. It was just detailed enough to look real, vague enough to be suspicious. I titled it, Potential Transfer Planning House Valuation and Ownership Update. It listed the value of the home at $640,000 and included a pending ownership adjustment clause. That phrase was bait. I knew Claire couldn't resist it. I went to bed. The next morning, the paper was gone. They didn't even bother to hide it. By the afternoon, Daniel approached me with a too casual smile. Hey Mom, about that document you left out, Claire and I have a few questions. Of course, I said warmly. Let's talk over dinner. I made lemon rosemary chicken, Henry's favorite. Claire barely touched it. We're just curious, Daniel said, trying to sound nonchalant. Are you thinking about changing the title of the house? Why do you ask? Claire leaned forward, her voice soft, falsely sweet. Because we want to help you, Susan. We're thinking long term. What if something happened? This house would go to probate, and that's messy. I folded my napkin slowly. Nothing is happening, I said, except that I'm watching. Claire blinked. Watching what? Who tries to take something that isn't theirs? There was a long silence. Then Daniel stood up. I think we should talk to someone. A real estate attorney, just to make sure everything's in order. By all means, I replied. Let them go. Let them dig. Let them burn energy chasing ghosts. I had already planted my trap. That night, I called Marilyn again. They took the fake summary. She laughed. Oh, honey, they've got no idea who they're dealing with. They think I'm just a grieving widow with a sentimental attachment to bricks. Well, you are, she said gently. But you're also brilliant. By the next week, things escalated. Claire began whispering into Daniel's ear constantly. He avoided eye contact. Then came the email from a lawyer named Spencer Klein, on behalf of Daniel and Claire, requesting a voluntary estate review and offering to assist in legal coordination should property restructuring be desired. They were trying to legally manipulate me into starting the process. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even aggressive. It was worse, it was polite. The kind of polite that smothers you. I didn't reply. I just sent the email to Marilyn, who sent back one word, pathetic. But it wasn't over. 2 days later, my printer began printing on its own. I walked into the study and found pages emerging from the tray and signed documents, copied from the folder I had planted. I checked the Wi-Fi logs. Claire had accessed my desktop through her phone using a shared network. She was in my files, reading, downloading, printing, violating my privacy without blinking. The next morning, I cooked breakfast and said nothing, but I changed the Wi-Fi password, and I scheduled a private meeting with Marilyn. Let's Put the hammer down, I said. We drew up a new limited access notice, a legal document that outlined the trust terms and froze any discussion of the house unless done through me. In writing, I placed it in a sealed envelope and wrote one sentence on the front, for when you think you've already won. I tucked it into the safe behind Henry's old gun cabinet. Then I waited. The storm came 3 days later. Claire cornered me in the hallway. You changed the Wi-Fi password? Yes. I was in the middle of reviewing some documents. My documents, I said. You're being unreasonable, she snapped. We're trying to help you. You're helping yourself, I said quietly. But you won't like how this ends. She went pale. What does that mean? I smiled. It means you'll find out soon. And I meant it, because by that point, Marilyn had contacted Spencer Klein herself and warned him, in no uncertain terms, that any continued pressure would be documented and legally pursued. He backed off instantly. A man like that? He didn't fight for clients like Claire. He just sent bills. That night, I left a second baited document out. It was a fake notice of property reassignment, showing that the house would soon be transferred not to Claire or Daniel, but to a local historical trust. I left it out with a handwritten note that said, "Final decision. I'm done being ignored." Then I went to bed. At 2:14 a.m., I heard footsteps on the stairs. My study door creaked open, and I knew they were about to cross a line they couldn't return from. The next morning, I waited in the kitchen with my tea already steeped, the morning sun pouring through the stained glass window Henry had installed himself. The one Claire once said was outdated. Daniel walked in first, hair disheveled, eyes darting. Claire followed, her face tight and guarded. She didn't look at me directly. So, I said casually, "Did you both sleep well?" Daniel hesitated. "Mom, what's this about a historic trust? Are you really giving the house away?" I took a slow sip of my tea. "Why does that concern you?" Claire opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Unless," I said, setting my cup down, "you were in my study last night, reading something you had no right to touch." Claire froze. Daniel looked at her, confused. What is she talking about? She stayed silent. Her eyes narrowed like a trapped animal. So I rose from my seat, walked to the study, and returned with the sealed envelope I had prepared days ago, the one that contained the truth. I placed it on the table and slid it toward Daniel. "This," I said, "is the only legal truth about this house." He opened it. "Read silently." Then he blinked. "Wait, the house is in a trust? Since when?" "Since before Dad died," I said calmly. "Irrevocable, ironclad. I couldn't sign it over even if I wanted to." Claire's face turned to stone. "You lied to us." She whispered. "No," I said gently. "I protected myself from people who lied to me." Claire stood up, shaking. "You baited me. You left those papers out on purpose. You knew I'd read them." "I did," I said, "because I needed to know who you really are. And now I do." Daniel looked between us, his voice rising. "Claire, what's going on?" She snapped. "I was just trying to secure our future. Your mom was sitting on a gold mine doing nothing with it." "Our future?" I said softly. "Or just yours?" She exploded. "You think I wanted this house because I care about wallpaper and flower beds?" "No, Susan. I wanted security. I married into a family that looked stable, and I found a woman stuck in the past. You won't even share your space, let alone your assets." Daniel stood there stunned. "You said it was about protecting her," Claire scoffed. "Please, she was never going to give us anything. I was trying to take care of us, Daniel, since no one else will." And that was the final crack. Daniel's face changed. I could see the blinders falling from his eyes. Slowly, tragically, he turned to me. "Is it all true?" he asked. I nodded. "I gave you both a home when you had none. I stayed quiet when she rearranged my memories. I listened while she planned renovations to my life. And you let her." Claire's voice shook. "You're manipulating him." "No," Daniel said suddenly clearly. "You did that. I let you." The silence between them was louder than any fight. Claire grabbed her purse. "You think I'm the villain? Fine. Enjoy your dusty little shrine of a house." She turned to Daniel. "You'll come home when you're done mourning her money." And just like that, she walked out the door. The house felt lighter. Daniel sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't see it," he whispered. "I didn't want to." I sat beside him. "You were in love," I said. "Sometimes that blinds us, but it doesn't have to define us." He turned to me, eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Mom. I touched his hand. It's not over. You can still fix what matters. That night, the house was quiet again. My house, my story, my peace. The next morning, Daniel packed his things and left Claire a message. She didn't reply, but that didn't matter. A few days later, he returned with 2 cups of coffee and an old photo of him and Henry working on the porch when he was 7. I found this in the basement, he said. Thought we could put it up in the hallway. I smiled. We hung it together. We didn't speak much, just existed in a silence that felt safe again. Later, over dinner, he asked, "Are you ever going to tell anyone how much this house is really worth?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the boy I raised, not the man who had forgotten me for a while. Maybe someday, I said. He nodded, then asked, "Would Dad be proud of you?" Tears welled in my eyes. I whispered, he'd be proud of both of us. 1 week later, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside, divorce papers. Claire had filed first. Attached was a handwritten note. "I hope you're satisfied. You ruined everything. Claire." I folded the note and slid it into the back of the ledger where Henry's note still lived, and then I smiled, because I wasn't satisfied. I was finally at peace, not because I had won, but because I had protected the one thing that mattered more than property, trust funds, or legacy. I protected the truth, and in doing so, I got my son back. Henry once told me, anyone can leave behind bricks and mortar, but the real inheritance is how you teach people to value what they already have. Now, I finally understood what he meant, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was ready.